If you're over 60, this message could be more than just advice. It could be a turning point. Harold never thought much about his health until the signs became too loud to ignore. Waking up 3, sometimes 4 times a night, that aching pressure before urinating, the hesitation, the weak stream. He figured it was just age catching up with him, but it wasn't. And what he discovered didn't just surprise him, it changed the course of his life. Today, Harold is 74 and living without the discomfort, embarrassment, and constant urgency he once accepted as normal. This is his story, and it might just be yours too. What helped Harold wasn't some miracle drug or surgery. It was understanding, knowing what was silently irritating his prostate every day and how to stop it. Let's walk through the same 10 habits Harold changed, the very ones that could be affecting your health right now. These aren't just health tips. They are lifelines for anyone over 60 dealing with urinary discomfort, poor sleep, or prostate inflammation. Habit 10. Chronic dehydration, Harold's turning point. Harold never considered himself careless with his health. He took his medications on time, kept his doctor's appointments, and even went for short walks around the block most mornings. But lately, something has changed. He was tired, not just the usual kind of tired that comes with age, but a deep, persistent fatigue that made even the simplest tasks feel like a burden. He was waking up 2, sometimes 3 times a night, stumbling half awake to the bathroom. His energy during the day was low, his mood sluggish, and his concentration faded in and out. He assumed it was just part of getting older, but it wasn't. Like many people his age, Harold had unconsciously developed a habit he didn't realize was harming him. He had stopped drinking enough water. The reason seemed logical at first. If he drank less in the evening, he wouldn't have to get up in the middle of the night. And who could blame him? Those nightly trips were exhausting and sometimes even risky with his balance, not what it once was. But his attempt to solve one problem had quietly created another. Without enough water during the day, Harold's urine had become dark and concentrated, a sign his body was struggling. That concentrated urine was irritating his bladder, making the urge to go more intense and more frequent. Worse still, some of the medications he took for blood pressure and joint pain were known to dehydrate the body even more. And no one had ever warned him about that. The consequences weren't just inconvenience. Chronic dehydration stresses the entire urinary system from the kidneys to the bladder to the prostate. For Harold, it was leading to a vicious cycle. Less water, more irritation, more nighttime trips, and less rest. Day after day, it was wearing him down. Then one afternoon at his checkup, his nurse practitioner asked a simple question. "How much water are you drinking each day, Harold?" That conversation changed everything. Harold learned that staying hydrated didn't mean chugging glasses of water at once. It meant sipping small amounts regularly, keeping the body gently and consistently supplied throughout the day. It was about consistency, not volume. So he made a new plan. He began sipping a small cup of water every hour while awake. Not too much, just enough to keep his mouth moist and his body fueled. He set a gentle reminder on his phone to drink a few sips. And, importantly, he stopped drinking fluids about 2 hours before bedtime, just enough time for his body to process it before sleep. The results didn't come overnight, but they did come. After a few days, Harold noticed his urine was a lighter, healthier yellow. The trips to the bathroom at night dropped to just once, sometimes not at all. More importantly, his energy during the day started to return. His body felt more balanced, and for the first time in weeks, his mind felt clear. He even began looking forward to his morning walks again. Harold realized something that too many people his age never get the chance to learn. Dehydration isn't just about thirst, it's about the quiet ways our bodies lose their balance when we stop paying attention. And the fix wasn't drastic. It was slow, steady, and simple. For Harold, it was a small habit, but gave him back his days and his nights. Habit 9. The hidden cost of sitting still. For years, Harold believed he was simply slowing down with age. After all, wasn't that expected in your late 70s? He had worked hard all his life, raised a family, built a small business, paid his dues. Now, retirement brought him the comfort of a recliner in the den, long road trips to visit grandkids, and quiet afternoons with the television humming in the background. But something wasn't right. The changes came gradually. He started feeling more pressure in his lower abdomen, waking up 2 or 3 times a night to use the bathroom. His legs felt stiff, almost numb, after sitting for too long. At first, he chalked it up to aging. Then came the digestive discomfort, the feeling of not being able to completely empty his bladder, and a creeping sense of fatigue that even a good night's sleep couldn't shake. A visit to his doctor was the wake-up call. His prostate health was being affected not by disease, but by something surprisingly simple, a sedentary lifestyle. The doctor explained it in plain terms. Sitting for long periods compresses the pelvic region. It reduces blood flow to the prostate and weakens the muscles responsible for bladder control. Over time, this causes real problems. Harold felt frustrated. "I'm not lazy," he told his doctor. "I just don't move around like I used to." But his doctor wasn't asking him to run marathons or join a gym. The prescription was straightforward: just move. Not intensely, not endlessly, just often. So Harold made a decision. He set a simple kitchen timer to go off every 30 minutes. When it rang, he'd stand up, stretch his arms above his head, or walk a few steps down the hallway. Some days he'd go out to the porch and take in the air. On better days, he'd walk out to the mailbox and back. At first, it felt silly. What difference could this make, he wondered. But within a few weeks, something remarkable began to happen. His legs, once heavy and weak, started to feel stronger. The urgency to rush to the bathroom lessened. He was sleeping through the night more often. Even his digestion, long a source of discomfort, seemed to settle. Most importantly, he felt more awake, more engaged with his own body. What Harold learned, and what many people his age still don't realize, is that movement doesn't have to be dramatic to be effective. It's not about sweating or straining. It's about breaking the stillness. Just a few minutes every half hour. A stretch, a walk across the room, a few arm circles by the kitchen sink. Small motions that keep the blood flowing, that tell your muscles and organs, "I'm still here and I'm still living." For Harold, that change didn't just help his body, it brought back something deeper. A sense of control, a quiet kind of strength, a way to age with dignity. So if you find yourself sitting a little too long, day after day, remember Harold. The recliner may offer comfort, but movement offers life. And it's never too late to take the first small step. Habit 8. Too much caffeine. Harold's story. Harold had always been a coffee lover. For over 50 years, it was how he started his mornings. A steaming mug of strong black coffee, rich and bold, just the way he liked it. Sometimes he'd have a second cup mid-morning, and in the afternoons, he might enjoy a bit of dark chocolate or even a cup of black tea while reading the paper. It had become part of his daily rhythm, a small comfort that helped him feel grounded. But over time, Harold noticed something changing. At first, it was subtle, waking up once in the night to use the bathroom, then twice, then 3 times. Some nights, he barely slept. His bladder always felt full, but he never felt like he emptied it completely. It was frustrating, exhausting really, and it wasn't just at night. During the day, he'd find himself cutting errands short, looking for the nearest restroom, and feeling anxious if he was too far from one. At his age, Harold knew his prostate was likely playing a role. His doctor had mentioned it. Nothing alarming, but some mild enlargement, the doctor had said gently. It was common in men over 60. Still, Harold didn't realize just how much his everyday habits could be making things worse. It wasn't until a conversation at his weekly book club that something clicked. A friend mentioned caffeine and how it could irritate the bladder. That night, Harold did some reading. What he found surprised him. Caffeine wasn't just a pick-me-up. It's a diuretic. It makes you urinate more by drawing fluid from your system. It also stimulates the bladder muscles and can cause inflammation. For someone like Harold, already dealing with a sensitive, aging prostate, that meant more urgency, more frequency, and that nagging sensation of never quite being done. So he made a decision. The next morning, instead of his usual 2 cups of black coffee, Harold brewed just 1 small cup of half CAF. Half regular, half decaf. It wasn't quite the same, but it was close enough. The rest of the day, He tried herbal teas instead. Chamomile in the afternoon and rooibos in the evening are both naturally caffeine-free and gentle on the system. The first few days weren't easy. He missed the kick of strong coffee and the ritual of it all. But something unexpected happened. By the end of the first week, he noticed he was making fewer trips to the bathroom. His bladder didn't feel as irritated, and the urgency began to ease. Most importantly, he started sleeping better through the night for the first time in months. A month later, Harold felt more like himself again. Less tired, more present. And while he still enjoyed his morning cup, it was no longer at the expense of his comfort or sleep. Habit 7. Spicy and processed foods, a hidden threat to prostate health. Harold never thought much about the food he ate. After all, he'd spent most of his life working hard, raising a family, and doing what needed to be done. Dinner was often whatever was fast and easy. Frozen meals, deli sandwiches, or takeout with a little kick of spice to keep things interesting. But as the years passed, Harold began to notice changes. He found himself waking up several times a night to use the bathroom. His joints ached more than usual, and he just didn't have the energy he used to. At first, he chalked it up to age. Part of getting older, he thought. But deep down, something didn't feel right. At a routine doctor's visit, Harold finally voiced his concerns. That conversation changed everything. His doctor explained that while aging does play a role, many of the symptoms Harold was experiencing could be made worse or even caused by the kinds of foods he was eating every day. The hidden impact of spicy and processed foods. Spicy foods and processed meals like frozen dinners, canned soups, deli meats, and snack foods are often loaded with preservatives, excessive salt, and unhealthy fats. These ingredients may seem harmless, but over time, they quietly create inflammation in the body. And for men, that inflammation can directly affect the prostate. The prostate is a small gland, but it has a big job. As men age, hormonal shifts can cause the prostate to enlarge, leading to uncomfortable symptoms, frequent urination, trouble starting or stopping, and even disrupted sleep. Spicy and processed foods only add fuel to that fire literally. They aggravate the body's natural balance and interfere with the hormones that regulate prostate size and function. Harold had never thought about his kitchen as a place of healing. But after doing a bit of research and talking to his doctor, he decided to make some changes. A simple shift in the kitchen. He didn't do anything drastic at first. He started small, cooking simple meals at home a few nights a week, using real ingredients: garlic, olive oil, leafy greens, fresh vegetables, and fish. Foods that didn't come in a box or wrapped in plastic. Within a few weeks, Harold began to notice a difference. He slept through the night more often. His joints weren't as stiff in the mornings. And perhaps most surprising of all, he had more energy, the kind he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about his prostate anymore. It was about feeling good again, about waking up and not dreading the day, about having the energy to play with his grandkids, take a walk with his wife, and feel truly present in his life. The takeaway for you, if you like Harold, if you've been leaning on convenience foods and spicy takeout for years, it's not too late to make a change. You don't need a complicated diet or expensive supplements. Sometimes, the most powerful changes begin at the dinner table. Try swapping just one processed meal a day for something fresh and simple. Add a few anti-inflammatory foods to your diet. Watch what happens. Because a healthy prostate doesn't start in a doctor's office. It starts in the kitchen. Habit 6. Holding urine. Harold's wake-up call. Harold was the kind of man who didn't like to be interrupted, not by a phone call, not by a knock at the door, and certainly not by the sudden need to use the bathroom. For years, he brushed off the urge to urinate, convincing himself it could wait. At church, during Sunday service, he'd feel the discomfort rise but would tighten his jaw and sit through it. Out on walks in the neighborhood, he'd push himself to finish another lap before heading back. Even while spending time with friends at the local diner, he'd ignore his body's quiet signals, not wanting to be the one to break up the fun or seem weak. I can hold it, he told himself. Just a little longer. But over time, that little longer began to take a toll. Harold didn't know it then, but every time he ignored his body's call, His bladder was being stretched beyond what it was meant to handle. The pressure built up silently, gradually affecting his prostate and making it harder for him to fully empty his bladder, even when he finally did make it to the restroom. At first, the changes were subtle: a weak stream, a feeling of not being quite done, and the need to get up during the night more often than before. But as weeks turned into months, these small inconveniences grew into daily frustrations. He felt uncomfortable more often. He started worrying about leaks. The constant trips to the bathroom during the night left him exhausted during the day. It wasn't until a mild urinary tract infection sent him to his doctor that Harold really began to understand the damage that had been done. His doctor explained that consistently holding urine for too long can overstretch the bladder muscles and increase pressure on the prostate, especially in older men. This not only made it harder to empty the bladder, but also raised the risk of infection and long-term urinary problems. Harold was surprised. He'd always thought that holding it in was a sign of self-control. He had no idea it could be doing him harm. So he made a change. He started listening to his body again, not ignoring the first urge, not telling himself later. Whether he was out walking or enjoying time with friends, he learned to excuse himself politely and go to the restroom as soon as he felt the need. It was a small shift, but made a world of difference. Within weeks, Harold noticed that the pressure and discomfort had eased. He no longer felt that constant tension in his lower belly. His nights became more restful, and he began to feel more confident during the day, not always scanning the room for the nearest bathroom. Most of all, he felt like he'd taken control back, not just of his bladder, but of his comfort, dignity, and peace of mind. For older adults like Harold, this story is a quiet reminder. Holding urine isn't harmless. It's okay, in fact. It's important to honor your body's signals. Sometimes, listening to a small urge can prevent a much bigger problem. Habit 5. Smoke exposure, Harold's story. For years, Harold thought he had left smoking behind. He quit 2 decades ago cold turkey. It wasn't easy, but he did it. His wife had been worried about his health, and after a troubling bout of bronchitis, Harold made the decision to give it up for good, and he stuck to it. No more cigarettes, no more ashtrays, no more hacking coughs in the mornings. But what Harold didn't realize, what many don't, is that secondhand smoke can be just as dangerous, especially when your body is already fighting other battles. Harold's struggle didn't come in the form of lungs anymore. It was his prostate. His doctor had been monitoring his PSA levels, and they had been slowly climbing over the years. Nothing drastic, but enough to raise concern. There was no cancer, thank goodness, but the signs were an inflamed prostate, frequent nighttime bathroom trips, and that ever-growing worry that something wasn't quite right. Harold did everything the doctor recommended. He took his medications on time. He adjusted his diet. He walked every morning. But something was holding his progress back. Then one day, during a routine checkup, his doctor asked a question that took him by surprise. "Harold, are you around any kind of smoke regularly?" At first, he said no. He hadn't smoked in years. But then he remembered his weekly poker night. Every Thursday, for almost 15 years, Harold and his friends gathered in Jim's basement. Cards, laughter, stories from the good old days, and always a haze of cigarette smoke in the air. Jim still smoked, so did Frank, and even though Harold never lit one himself, especially one trying to manage an aging prostate, that secondhand smoke was a silent threat. Nicotine, even from the air, constricts blood vessels. It reduces circulation. It slows down the body's ability to heal and fight inflammation. For a younger man, maybe it would pass unnoticed. But for Harold, every breath was a barrier to healing. That was the wake-up call. Just a space he cleaned out with a folding table and a few chairs. But it was smoke-free. The guys even brought air fresheners and a space heater when it got cold. And over time, Harold noticed a change. His chest felt lighter. He wasn't waking up with that dry throat anymore. And slowly, almost quietly, his PSA numbers began to drop. Not by a lot, but enough that his doctor smiled during their next appointment. "That's a good trend," she said. "Keep going." And Harold did, because sometimes Healing doesn't come from pills or procedures. Sometimes it comes from small choices, the ones we don't think matter until they do. For Harold, it was moving a table and folding a few chairs. For his body, it meant the chance to breathe, to recover, to live a little better, one smoke-free breath at a time. Habit 4. Skipping screenings. Harold's story. For most of his life, Harold wasn't the kind of man who liked going to the doctor. He wasn't careless, just old-fashioned. Like many men of his generation, he believed that if something wasn't broken, you didn't fix it. And if you didn't feel sick, you didn't need a doctor poking around. So year after year, Harold skipped routine checkups. He stayed busy with yard work, fishing trips, and helping his grandkids with school projects. He felt fine at least. That's what he kept telling himself. But there were signs. He began waking up several times a night to use the bathroom. Sometimes it was hard to start urinating. Other times, he felt like he hadn't emptied his bladder completely. Still, he brushed it off. Part of getting older, he told himself. His wife, Linda, noticed. She gently pushed him to see a doctor. "Just get checked," she said. "If nothing's wrong, at least we'll have peace of mind." Reluctantly, Harold agreed. He went in for a physical, which included a digital rectal exam and a PSA blood test. The results came back, early signs of prostate enlargement. Thankfully, it was caught before things got worse. The doctor explained that if it had gone unnoticed, it could have led to serious complications, urinary retention, infections, or even kidney problems. But because it was detected early, Harold didn't need medication or surgery. Instead, his doctor recommended simple but effective changes, adjusting his diet, staying active, and cutting back on caffeine and alcohol. It wasn't dramatic, but it worked. Now, Harold goes in for a screening every 6 months. It's part of his routine, no different than changing the oil in his truck or mowing the lawn. He doesn't dread it anymore. It's quick, it's easy, and it gives him peace of mind. What Harold learned and what he tells his friends is simple. Ignoring something doesn't make it go away. Getting checked might seem like a hassle, but it's a small thing that can make a big difference. For men in their 60s and beyond, Harold's story is a reminder that some problems don't shout, they whisper. And if you're not listening, you might miss the chance to do something about them before they get out of hand. So if you've been putting off that screening, maybe it's time. You don't have to do it alone. Talk to your doctor. Talk to your spouse. And remember, it's not just about you, it's about the people who love you too. Habit 3. High red meat intake. Harold had always loved steak. For most of his life, a thick, juicy cut of beef on the grill wasn't just dinner, it was a ritual. Sunday barbecues with the family, 4th of July cookouts, or just a quiet evening at homesteak was Harold's comfort, his reward, and a symbol of the life he had worked hard to build. He grew up in a time when meat was at the center of every meal, and red meat, especially, was a mark of prosperity. It tasted like home, but things began to change. In his late 60s, Harold started to feel that something was off. He noticed more frequent trips to the bathroom at night, occasional discomfort, and a lingering fatigue that no amount of coffee could fix. His doctor suggested some tests, and while there was no diagnosis of prostate cancer, Harold learned that his inflammation markers were elevated, particularly around the prostate. It was a warning sign, not urgent yet, but enough to make him stop and think. That's when the conversation turned to diet. His physician gently explained that red and processed meats, especially beef, bacon, and sausages, are high in saturated fats. These fats can raise inflammation in the body, putting added stress on aging organs, including the prostate. For someone in Harold's stage of life, every food choice began to matter a little more than it used to. The very meals that once brought him comfort were now quietly adding to the strain on his body. At first, Harold resisted. He didn't like the idea of giving up something he loved. But then his doctor said something that stuck. You don't have to give it up completely. Just rethink how often you have it. So Harold made a choice not to eliminate red meat entirely, but to treat it as a rare treat rather than a staple. He began limiting red meat to once a week. At first, he missed it, but then something unexpected happened. He started to feel better. The nightly discomfort lessened. He had more energy in the mornings. His digestion improved. and he began exploring new foods he'd never really considered before. Grilled chicken became his go-to, especially when seasoned with lemon and herbs. Lentil soup, something he once thought of as bland, became a new favorite when his daughter shared a recipe. Even roasted vegetables, colorful and rich in flavor, found a place on his plate. Over time, Harold discovered something he hadn't expected. Food could still be satisfying, even more so when it didn't leave his body inflamed and sluggish. And perhaps the biggest surprise? He didn't feel like he was missing out. He still had a steak on Saturday nights. But now, it was truly something to savor an occasional pleasure, not a daily habit. For Harold, it wasn't about giving things up. It was about choosing a way forward that honored his body's needs as it aged. He realized that the comfort he once found in food could still be there, but it had to evolve with him. And that simple shift of just one habit made all the difference. Habit number 2, abdominal fat, the hidden risk few talk about. Harold never thought much about the soft weight that slowly built up around his belly. Just part of getting older, he used to say with a chuckle, patting his waistline like an old friend. But what he didn't know was that this belly fat wasn't just about appearance. It was quietly working against him and his health. As the years passed, Harold began to notice changes. More frequent trips to the bathroom at night. A heaviness, a pressure in his lower abdomen that wouldn't go away. His energy dipped, and some days he just felt off. His doctor mentioned something that surprised him. His abdominal fat wasn't just sitting there. It was actively producing estrogen-like substances that interfered with his body's hormone balance. In men, especially those past 60, this kind of fat can contribute to an enlarged prostate and make urinary symptoms worse. That hit Harold hard. He'd always been relatively healthy, never smoked, kept his checkups, but no one had told him that the weight around his middle could be silently affecting his prostate health. He decided it was time to take action, not with anything extreme, but with small, steady steps. Every morning, Harold laced up his sneakers and stepped outside. 20 minutes of walking, just him and the quiet of the neighborhood. At first, it wasn't easy. His knees ached, and he had to stop and catch his breath. But he kept at it. He also made simple changes to his meals. The cookies he used to reach for in the afternoon, he swapped them for a handful of nuts or a piece of fruit. At dinner, he cut back on sugary drinks and focused more on vegetables and lean protein. Then came resistance bands. Nothing fancy, just light strength training a few times a week to help rebuild the muscle he'd lost over the years. The bands didn't strain his joints, and they gave him the strength and confidence he hadn't felt in a long time. 5 months later, Harold had lost 15 pounds. His waist shrank noticeably. But more than that, he felt better. The pressure in his abdomen eased. The nighttime bathroom visits became less frequent. His doctor noticed the improvements too. What started as a small step turned into a big shift. Harold didn't chase youth, he embraced health. And in doing so, he took back control from a quiet problem most men never see coming. If you're over 60 and carrying extra weight around your belly, know this, it's not just a cosmetic issue. It's a health issue. But just like Harold, you don't need to run marathons or give up everything you enjoy. You could take small, realistic steps, walks, better food choices, light strength training, and make a lasting difference. Your body may be aging, but it's never too late to care for it. You deserve to feel strong, steady, and in control. Start today, gently, simply, and with the knowledge that every step matters. Habit 1. Chronic stress. Harold's story. Harold never thought of himself as someone who was stressed. He had lived through tough times before wars, economic downturns, the loss of friends and family. Life had always demanded resilience, and he'd always delivered. But in recent years, things have changed. Since retiring, the days grew quieter. Too quiet. The house, once filled with the sounds of children running down the hallway and the clatter of dinner plates, now echoed with silence. His wife had passed away 5 years earlier, and while Harold told himself he was managing, the loneliness crept in quietly, like fog rolling under a door. Then there were the bills. Even after a lifetime of careful saving, The rising cost of healthcare, groceries, and home maintenance tugged at his peace of mind. He'd wake up some nights with a knot in his chest, worrying whether his money would last or if he'd become a burden to his children. He noticed his body changing too. His hands ached more than they used to. He felt tired even after a full night's sleep, and every little cold seemed to hang on longer than before. At his next doctor's appointment, the physician gently explained, "Harold, I think what you're experiencing is chronic stress. It's not always dramatic, but over time it wears the body down. It increases inflammation and weakens your immune system." Harold was surprised. He'd thought stress was something that only came from big moments, job loss, divorce, a sudden crisis. But this was something quieter, heavier, and persistent. The slow drip of worry, the weight of unspoken grief, the loneliness he hadn't named. It was hard to accept, but Harold decided to try something new. He started small. Each morning, he sat by the window with a notebook and wrote a few lines about how he felt. At first, it was just frustration. "I miss her. I'm tired. I'm scared." But with time, his words became more reflective. He remembered old stories, moments of joy, and reasons to keep going. He began meditating just 10 minutes a day. Sitting in stillness didn't come easily at first, but soon he noticed a difference. His breath slowed. His mind softened. That constant tension in his shoulders began to ease. Most importantly, Harold picked up the phone. One by one, he called old friends, neighbors he hadn't seen in years, a cousin he used to fish with, an army buddy he hadn't spoken to since the 90s. Some calls were short, some long, but every voice helped build a bridge back to something he'd lost: connection. Weeks passed, then months, and little by little, Harold felt different. He still had aches. The bills still came, but he was sleeping better. He laughed more. His appetite returned. His doctor even noted that his blood pressure had improved slightly. More than anything, Harold felt something he hadn't in a long time: peace. Not every day was perfect, but he had tools now. A way to steady the ship when the waves came. And in his quiet home, where the silence had once felt so loud, there was now a quiet he could live with. A calm, born not of avoidance, but of understanding and of healing. The tool that made it easier. Senior Health Tracker, one of Harold's biggest allies, was a mobile app. Not a flashy one, but a practical one. It reminded him to drink water, log symptoms, and track his walks. At his next doctor visit, he showed the data, and together they made informed choices. Consistency, he realized, was the secret weapon. Harold's message to you: don't wait for your body to scream. Listen when it whispers. He says, "I didn't make all the changes at once. I started with water. Then I walked more. Then I ate better. And one day I noticed I felt young again." So if you're reading this, take the first step. Your prostate may be small, but the impact it has on your life is huge. Change one habit. Share this with a friend. Use the tools available. Your health is worth the time, and you're never too old to start healing. Because healing isn't about age. It's about action.